Hi, welcome to a brief presentation on designing effective discussion questions for the eInvestigators cases. So there are three places where you may be designing questions for the eInvestigator students to discuss. In asynchronous discussions within Canvas, during the live sessions where you'll be writing an agenda and an outline for discussion questions the lead investigator will use, and then in debriefings where you might suggest a couple casual questions that the lead investigators might have in their back pocket to support students. There are three types of questions you could design: didactic, coaching, and Socratic or Maieutic. The first type, didactic, you'll be familiar with as who, what, when, where type of questions. These are knowledge and comprehension questions, and they're geared towards students acquiring knowledge. So if you pose these questions, you're compelling a student to engage in recalling facts, information, or procedures. And you can see here some types of question stems that you might use: the who, what, where, when, the how many, where you're looking for a number. Basically, you're designing a question to get students to respond with bits and bytes of knowledge, the facts and definitions, the methods and procedures, things they can recite like, from memory or from looking something up. So you're going to start a didactic question with these types of stems, and keep in mind that these are great warm-up questions for a live session when students are coming in, they're trying to get familiar with the case again, you're doing a quick review, asking the lead investigators to get students warmed up. Then, of course, there are coaching questions, often beginning with a stem of how. And if you're designing a coaching question, your goal is application and analysis skill. That's what you want the students to be doing. They're going to be developing various skill practice types. You're going to compel them to classify, organize, estimate, collect, display, observe, and compare data, as well as concepts and ideas. So here are some stems you might think about where you're inspiring a student to apply what they know, compare and contrast, look for motives, look for pieces and components as they're dissecting something, that type of skill practice. Here are some stems that you might start a coaching question with, and a lot of times they begin with how, but you might say infer, categorize, organize, classify. These are great questions if you are designing an asynchronous discussion or maybe a skill activity practice within a live session. And finally, there's Maieutic or Socratic. Maieutic, by the way, relates to midwifery and the idea of bringing into being an understanding. So why, should, what if are questions that will inspire this, but in particular, why is a great question stem. And so you will be inspiring students to analyze, synthesize, and evaluate with these types of questions with the goal of enlarging their understanding. You're compelling them with these types of questions to reason, plan, you want them to make conjectures, and then of course support it with evidence, whatever reasoning they come to. And this is requiring complex reasoning and also interdisciplinary connections. So why is a great question stem. Also the what if, any type of question stem that leads students to investigate and problem solve towards a solution. Maybe something that allows them to evaluate a little bit and critique, or even get to a moral or ethical stance of should. So here again are the question stems. Why is of course a perfect beginning or instigator of a Socratic question, but also stems such as assess, hypothesize, prove, develop, synthesize. These, of course, are great questions for an asynchronous discussion. They can really stand on their own for students to dig into, or an open-ended discussion in a live session where you really want to get kids to a larger conceptual level. So when you design these questions, use this rubric in your mind when you look back. Now, keeping in mind that not every question has to hit everything on this rubric, but these are some things that are helpful, and the more things you can hit, the better and more effective the discussion question will be. So the first thing to ask yourself is, well, do the discussion questions allow multiple entry points based on students' knowledge and comprehension levels, also their analytical abilities and their synthesis abilities? Can these questions be scaffolded? In live sessions in particular, when we talked about warming up to the deeper, more heavily critical thinking questions. So starting with knowledge and comprehension and then building up to the high-level analysis, synthesis, and evaluation questions. Do these questions encourage students to interact with one another and share? Do they encourage students to complete a task or solve a problem in real time? Do these questions requiring them to cite evidence and apply knowledge and skill that they've gained during the week? And are students by these questions required to respond to peer comments? Are they given some kind of guidelines on how to do so? So basically you have here a quick overview of designing effective questions for discussion, then apply again to those asynchronous discussions in Canvas, to the live session outlines you're designing, and also if in the facilitation guide you're giving any tips or tricks on great questions for instructors to have as follow-up questions during the debriefing or really any time during the case, these questions will be very effective. Thanks for listening.